Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show, folks. I am honored to have back with me someone who's a very dear friend and someone who is, needless to say, been on the front line for decades. And with his group of friends and actually students who are now in charge of various operations, I can't think of a better person to have with us than the Commander Scott Snow. For those of you not familiar with Scott, I could go on for a half hour in his introduction. Let me just hit the bullet points here on Scott. He is a retired fighter pilot, served our country over 20 years as a commissioned officer. He's logged 3,200 hours in fighters, F-14, 16, 18, 2,025 of which were in the F-14. 618 traps or landings on aircraft carriers, 335 combat hours. In addition to his myriad deployments and myriad missions, becoming a landing service officer, a signal officer, he also was in charge of naval operations for all of the carrier groups in the Pacific at one point in his career, and also was in charge of operations for the Top Gun program. With everything occurring, through whether it's Russia, Ukraine, now the Middle East, soon to becoming potentially China, Taiwan, I can't think of a better person to have with us than Commander Scott Snow. Scott, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Doc. Good to see you again.
So, Scott, I'm going to give you a little quote here and have you get your impression. This was actually made in the late 1930s. Quote, "Naturally, the common people don't want war. But after all, it's the leaders of a country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people who really don't want war along. Whether it's a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship, voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That's easy. All you have to do is tell them they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. Well, it works every time, and it works the same in every country," end quote. Hermann Goering made that comment. Your take, Scott.
Well, it goes back to what drives and what drives wars is politics. And from the politics, what they need to instill is fear, yet again, into the people to a point where it's either going to be a terrorist attack inside our own borders because we have an open southern border that's going to light it off, or we lose one of our major assets that's out there as a blocking maneuver to keep Iran from jumping into the fray. But it's fear that drives the herd. So much like you have one sheepdog running around, what's he do? He's one dog, and he's able to make 1,000 sheep go the direction he wants them to.
So let's talk where the sheep herder's taking the sheep, or the sheepdog's taking the sheep, in the Middle East right now. So, Scott, give us your assessment of the Middle East situation, and I want to start it out with a question. On October 7th, 2023, a group of savages is probably the best way to describe them, killed innocent Israelis by the hundreds. My question is this, Scott. How did that happen? By that I mean, Israel has one of the most, let's say, proficient, well-funded militaries. It has intelligence agencies, whether you look at Mossad or you look at Shin Bet or Unit 8200, one of the most storied, reportedly proficient intelligence agency services that is connected to the United States, the CIA, Britain, MI6, Australia's intelligence service, Canada's intelligence service, New Zealand's intelligence service, the so-called Five Eyes, networked to the max, that has been put over the years, many years, trillions of dollars, has the most secure, high-tech border security fencing system where reportedly a flock of birds coming at it from a mile away can be picked up and be taken out. So, Scott, how did a bunch of dudes who had been training reportedly in Lebanon for months, how did they penetrate all of those systems with pickup trucks, bulldozers, hang gliders, drones? How did that happen, Scott?
Well, in my honest opinion, it was allowed to happen. And it was a stand down from the IDF, from the border. They even moved the music festival closer to a contested area to allow this to happen. And it's part of that, stoking the fire to, run the fourth law of thermodynamics. If the heat's on someone else, it's not on me. So you got Bibi, who's embroiled in all kinds of corruption scandals to a point that, they're indicting him, and he's getting very unpopular with the general populace. In fact, they had 100,000, protesters against him, just a month prior. Mm-hmm. And so he sees it coming as, how do I distract? And like Wayne Allen Root always says, it's WMD, weapon of mass distraction, and to rile the people to make him a wartime president.
So, Scott, there are many people that don't have military experience or the type of operational experience you have that will say, wait a minute, this was allowed to happen? Why? No. The IDF, the leadership of Israel, the leadership around the world that was overseeing with the intelligence, they wouldn't have allowed innocent people to die just to promote, escalate a war. Scott, set all those people straight, because people need to have, if you will, an awakening about the psychopaths that are on all sides of this equation.
Absolutely, because the psychopaths don't have to go fight it. They just have to incite it. Yeah. That's the big difference. And once they light the emotional fires inside the belly of all their general populace and anyone and everyone associated with Israel, that these barbarians came over the gate, hey, let's go get them all. And when I say all, they want all of them gone. 2.3 million people.
Mm-hmm. So, Scott, the people on the one side of the equation go, well, yeah, there's going to be some innocent loss of life, and that's terrible, but for the greater cause, we'll accept that. Is that a fair statement of how they, I don't know if you want to call it think, but of their mental processes?
With the leadership, absolutely.
Okay.
The psychopathic piece of it. And the one thing people don't realize is how small of an area this is.
Yeah, that's right.
It's half the size of Manhattan Island. It's 305 square miles.
So, Scott, then some people are going to say, well, wait a minute, Hamas knew that this would incite incredible retribution. Hamas wouldn't sacrifice 2.3 million Palestinians in doing this because they knew there had to be retribution. Well, there's psychopaths on that side of the equation. They're willing to do that, aren't they, Scott? Because they're thinking they can take this and get everybody in the bathtub.
That's exactly it. And it's lighting that candle to them. And it's the thing that people need to realize. That is there a country of Hamas? Is there a standalone state of Hamas? No. It's an ideology.
Yeah. And
so how did the only way you get rid of an ideology is you have to give them a better ideology, something else to move to. Mm-hmm. And when their ideology is resistance and death to Israel, how do you move them off of that? And if you're not going to bomb them into it, you're just going to make more. You're going to steal the horses and the recruiting bed for Hamas for many years to come.
So, Scott, you and I have spoken about this on several occasions off air, but I think we need to speak about this on air. I'm very concerned that we're going to use the template of, I don't know, what do you want to call it, Pearl Harbor, Gulf of Tonkin, 9/11, 2001, right? We're going to use a template where personnel are deliberately put in harm's way and willing to sacrifice those individuals so that we can escalate this. So, for example, Scott, my concern is we now have two carrier groups in the Mediterranean. Reportedly, one of the carriers, the Eisenhower, is going to pass through a number of choke points through reportedly going through reportedly going to go through the Suez Canal, choke point, then around the Strait of Djibouti by Yemen, choke point, then go to through the Strait of Hormuz, choke point, into the Persian Gulf. All the while, it's been demonstrated that there are entities that have hypersonic missiles that go at Mach 15 or something. That carrier is toast, Scott. Am I off in my concern about these choke points and this potential event that's going to just escalate this to a potential nuclear event? Am I off on that? Is that fear mongering? Is that being paranoid? Is that what? Scott, your take?
Well, they're the state to go, waiting for the predator to come in and get them. They're just dangling out there, in the wind, trying to incite, enough anger for someone to push the button. And the neocons in D.C. have wanted for nearly ever. Iraq was never enough for them. They always wanted Iran. They've wanted war with Iran for many, many, many years. And they're at the beck and call of Israel. And now with the weak leadership that we have in our duly elected president, Joe Biden, they see weakness across the board. And everyone's going to fall in lockstep. You got 3/4 of the House of Representatives all, hey, everybody backs Israel. Hey, I'm the new speaker. Whatever Israel wants, Israel gets. Well, what if Israel's crazy just like they are? Mm-hmm. And now they're playing with making a lot of parts of the world 4,500 degrees and partly cloudy, and that's not a good suntan. Nobody wants that.
So Scott, play this out. You've as I said, you've sat in a cockpit for thousands of hours. You've landed on a carrier hundreds of times. You've been the operations director for the Pacific Fleet carriers. You've been the operations director for the Top Gun program. Okay, Scott. Tell it, because Scott, the one thing I'm not seeing calls to get everybody in the room, lock the freaking door, and nobody comes out until this thing is there's some semblance of an agreement so that more innocents don't die on every side of this equation. So Scott, tell me how you believe this is going to play out.
I think it goes right to what we're seeing in the White House and leadership right now. They're driven by AI. It's arrogance and incompetence. And when you have your Secretary of State, who's a Jewish citizen, or an Israeli citizen, by the way, Tony Blinken.
Dual citizen.
Dual citizenship. Who do you think he's going to side with?
Yeah.
So when it comes to détente and diplomatic solutions, the only adults in the room are the leaders of Turkey and Russia. And I hate to say it, but even the leaders of Iran are more sane than the rest of what we're dealing with. And they've gotten to a point where from weakness, you can't negotiate anything.
Right.
And we have such demonstrated weakness on our side, who's going to listen to them? You have a president that can't form a coherent sentence when it's written on the pad right in front of him. How's he going to negotiate peace? Peace comes through strength, Ronald Reagan. Yeah. That's how you negotiate.
So what happens, Scott? Continual escalation until this goes nuclear?
I'm afraid we're headed down that path. and look at it from Israel and the bloodlust that they have. They lost 1,500 Israelis, and that's a horrible tragedy.
Yeah.
But we're pushing towards 10,000 Palestinians that are dead, half of which are children. Were the children in hang gliders coming in?
No.
Do we respect life and all are some lives better than other lives? It needs to stop. And how much is enough? Is Israel going to go until, well, maybe a couple thousand more? Maybe we'll just keep bombing until we can just bulldoze it and make a new resort. But that's the mindset of wiping them out in their entirety. How bad is that going to look and stain Israel from here on out? They're getting to a point reputationally that they may never come back from. They've gone from, oh, we're the victims, to who are the barbarians now? Mm-hmm. And there's no stop to it, to a point that it's going to rile the rest of the Arab world that Israel is surrounded by to say no more. And it's almost to a point that we have to step in and save Israel from itself. Because what's going to happen is they back themselves into a corner that they can't kill their way out of. And as soon as Turkey, Hezbollah in Syria, Yemen already declared war on them, mm-hmm. Iran jumps into the fray, Russia backs up Iran, who's left on the table? It's all knives out for Israel, and Israel disappears.
Well, and even China, a couple of days ago, put their state department have maps of which there is no Israel on the maps. Mm-hmm. That wasn't a mistake.
Oh no, that's a signal.
They're telling you. I mean, unfortunately they're always like 10 steps ahead of everybody else. They're telling you where this is going. A concern I have, Scott, and you can tell me if it's not justified, is that Turkey, at least at this point, hasn't jumped in, other than Erdogan saying, hey, we got a problem over here, and we got Israel now. Wait, now, yeah, there was a loss of life on your side. We get it, but wait a minute. My concern is that we have American bases there. We have nukes in Turkey. What's going to stop him at some point if this keeps going on, where he steps in and goes, U.S.? No. Those bases are now our bases, and those nukes are now our nukes, and your personnel are now out of luck, and they're hostages. I mean, I have that concern. Is that unwarranted?
No, not at all. How long do you think it would take to get our army over there to Turkey to back up and backstop our troops that are there now? It's not going to happen. You get Turkey's got the biggest standing army out there, and the big arrogance that comes out of the neocons is that, oh well, hey, we're the best of the best, and no one can match us, and we're the greatest military ever on the face of the earth. Well, we've been for the last 30 years just dropping bombs in the desert to no opposition. And you tell me that's, we're ready to go fight an actual power. We're ready to go. We want to go stand toe to toe with Israel and Russia and Turkey and China all at the same time. That's a pipe dream.
And on top of it, now,
it's just not there anymore.
And on top of it, Scott, we got a huge hostage crisis. Back in the Jimmy Carter days, Ted Koppel, that's when Nightline started. Dun, 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 day 53, hostages, Iran hostages. And that was a number of dozen of them. Well, reportedly, there are 500, 600 Americans over there, in addition to, I think, close to 2,000 total hostages over there. And nobody's talking about this being a hostage situation. And instead, it's just bombs away, right? That's how we're handling this hostage situation?
Well, the hostage situation is of our own making.
Yeah.
What did Biden? It's like, oh, you need $6 billion? Sure, here you go.
Yeah.
And release a couple of people. It's like, well, you just put a bounty on everybody's head who's connected to the U.S. Right. And now it's like, oh, well, that guy's worth something. Hey, let me go grab Dave. Dave's worth a couple $1 million. We'll trade him out for that. That'd be great. Or maybe we'll just trade them, the millions of dollars to Ukraine for the weapons that the U.S. sent over there that are now in the hands of Hamas.
That we're fighting against our own stuff.
Yeah.
Right? We got, what,
Absolutely.
8 billion arms from Afghanistan that good old Joe and Kamala left behind. We got the 6 billion, as you said, that were just transferred to Iran, plus the billions that good old Obama gave them, right? And
That's the cash, baby. That's the cash.
right? And then the laundered, as you mentioned, arms coming that we taxpayers sent over, not willingly, at least some of us, to Ukraine that now got laundered into the Middle East. Good old Z-Man's making a little, cashola on the side. I mean, we're fighting against our own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when this gets hot and heavy, Scott, what's going to stop when when everybody is, as you say, conglomerated against Israel, and Israel realizes it's backed in a corner, and that it's, what's going to stop them from launching a nuke toward Iran to try to suck in the rest of the world, and then Iran then essentially sending similar, because they're going to have similar ordnance, they already do, sending similar nuclear ordnance in toward Israel. What, Scott? Unfortunately, that's where I see this going. What's your take? Am I off?
No, I see it going exactly the same way. And it's where, the Israeli government is, government by the government for the government, much like the U.S. is. And unless you get the majority of the Israeli people to come to their senses and dismantle the government that they have, that's, to me, really one of the only ways to stop this. Because you're not going to be able to stop it by force. I still think Israel's probably going to get backed into the corner, have heavy losses in Gaza, and they're the ones that are going to pull out the nuclear card. And as soon as that, just one, even just an artillery shell, and now it's game on. And it's coming from all sides at that point.
And then to add, and let's face it, Russia, China, Iran, they can bring down the whole financial system, which blows apart the whole thing, by just closing the Strait of Hormuz by sinking a ship. And what if that ship happens to be a carrier by the name of the Eisenhower? Now you've really, right? Because 20% of the oil flow of the world goes through the Strait of Hormuz. 18% of the liquid natural gas goes through you take all those derivative positions where all these banks of the world are in these derivatives, it all goes kaboom.
Yep.
And they're okay, by the way, because they set up their whole BRICS system, right? So that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have commodity-backed money. So whether it's gold, whether it's oil, it's backed by something. We're full fiat. We got a bag of nothing behind it. They're just going to push the print button. And to dovetail onto what you're saying about 20% of the world's oil, when this thing goes hot in the Middle East, what do you think is going to happen to the rest of the energy supply for the rest of the world that is not a BRICS nation? Do you think Russia's going to start selling us oil? No. Do you think Venezuela is going to start selling us oil? No. They can beg and plead all they want, but energy is what runs the world economy.
But the good news, Scott, is our strategic petroleum reserve is full, and the also good news is our pipelines have been, the infrastructure, the pipelines have been funded by the federal government, so that there's obviously some reserve that we can count. Oh wait, no. Actually, yeah, we have no strategic petroleum reserve at this point, and no, those pipelines weren't funded and are non-existent at this point.
Yeah, and it's not like you can turn it on, turn it off.
And
it's a multi-year project to get it back on.
And Scott,
and we have 15 days. That's how deep our petroleum reserve is. 15 days.
And it's not an accident.
Nope.
It's not a coincidence. Goes to this quote by Gary Barnett. Concerning the state, there are no accidents, no coincidences, and no national emergencies or threats. All is planned.
Absolutely. Well, the walls are closing in on Biden. I need a distraction.
Well, this is one big distraction.
Absolutely.
And the financial system was set to implode, but they needed a reason for people not to point at the bankers who rigged the system to blow, but they want people to point at the Middle East and say that's what brought the system down.
That's what caused it. It was supposed to go down in October, Dave. Mm-hmm. The economy, that is. Mm-hmm. So this was just in time.
So, Scott, it appears the only way to potentially put a tourniquet on this extremity that's pumping out blood, the only tourniquet we can apply at this point is people standing up in Israel and frankly around the world and making a stand and saying, stop this. Stop this madness, right? So for you and me, it's us calling our congressmen, our senators, the White House, our state officials, our local officials, and say, listen, stop it. Stop the warmongering racket. You're going to get everybody killed. And if you're not willing to get off dead center and do something about this, oh, I'm just a state senator. Well, you got the contacts, use them. Tell them the people are wise to this con. Stop it. That's our only way, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. War is a racket. And it, much like it's been said time and time again, follow the money. Who makes money when there's war? The military-industrial complex. You know, there's no... When you look at Lockheed Martin, and when they make $603 billion a year, mm-hmm. and that's just the top company, and you got another 25, little piglets underneath them, all making the, similar amounts of money. That's who reaps it in. And the other problem that I see is that you have so many leaders in the U.S. that are still stuck in the minds, oh, we're a unipolar world. We're the only superpower. Mm-mm. And until they get to understand that it's now a multipolar world and we have become a paper tiger with the massive amounts of debt that we have. No one wants to buy our debt anymore. We're essentially bankrupt, and we need to wake up from this bad dream and talk to the other leaders, to the Putin, to the Xi, around the globe. That's how that to me is the only way cooler minds will prevail in sitting down, locking the door, and sticking Israel in a chair in the middle of the room and saying, knock it off.
And the odds of that happening, Scott?
Slim to none. There's too much arrogance and misplaced pride in the politicians to do that. They've been told the entire time that they're undefeatable. You have Lindsey Grahamnesty out there. Yeah. It's like, oh, all that money we gave to Ukraine, that's the best money we ever spent because it kills Russians.
Yeah, right.
Who talks like that?
Psychopath.
Yeah.
A guy who's never stepped foot in a battlefield, let alone a boot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's who speaks like that. Scott, you spent a lot of time on carriers in your career. All those pilots that are on the Ford and on the Eisenhower right now, what are they thinking?
Truthfully,
yeah,
I would say they're a little wound up. And what is this for? And how am I going to get out of this alive? Self-preservation. And we had it going into Iraq when we kicked in the door back in 2003. We're going after someone that has a lot of surface-to-air missiles. Mm-hmm. They're not going to throw any airplanes up, but now multiply that by you've got all the surface-to-air missiles. And what if Turkey decides to jump in? They've got fighter jets. What if Russia wants to jump in? They've got fighter jets. Mm-hmm. Syria's got fighter jets. Jordan's got fighter jets. Iran even has fighter jets. Now it's a totally different ballgame. It's not plinking targets in the desert with no opposition. Now it's full-scale war, top to bottom.
And as you've mentioned to me in private, the anti-aircraft ordnance they have, potentially directed at them, is enormous.
Absolutely, it's best in the world. Better than our Patriot system, by far.
So, Scott, I asked you if you were in a cockpit now and you were on a mission and your systems alerted you that there was an incoming ordnance directed at you, what would be the ordinance that you would be like, oh God, I hope it's not that, because if it is, I'm as you say, pink mist?
Yeah. No, the Russian surface to air systems. So starting with the S-400 and up, we did war games, planned many times. How am I going to get into that and get back out? And it's, they're death missiles. They're locked on and going. It's hard to get away from it.
And those systems have been deployed in the Middle East.
Yes.
So, Scott, on a carrier, those folks on the Eisenhower and the Ford, the pilots that are going to be put up there, do they ever say to their commanding officer, sir, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? We look for how we're going to get back safe. And when I look at this mission, I don't see how I'm going to get back safe. Or any of us get back safe. Does that discussion ever occur?
Internally, but it won't come out loud, because I had one of my junior officers in Iraq who suddenly couldn't clear his ears to go on the mission after the sandstorm came in and it was solid from 5,000 feet to 37,000 feet. So I ended up having to take his place as a wingman to go into combat because he wasn't willing to do it. We have strong, willing, and able naval aviators that will do what they signed up to do. And they'll toe the line, but they also realize inside it may be the last line that they toe. And they're not going to let that come out of their mouth, but I can tell you in their gut, that's rumbling around in there.
What about the commanding officer themselves? Of let's say you're the commanding officer of the Eisenhower, and you're told, yeah, you're going down the Suez Canal, you're going to go around the Strait of Djibouti, you're going to go through the Strait of Hormuz, and you're going to hang out in the Persian Gulf. Obviously, you're going to follow orders, but is there any blowback that occurs from the commanding officer side back to those sitting around in the leather chairs back in D.C. telling them to do this?
It's going to have to filter through the admiral, and that's only if they have a good relationship. And then it's up to the battle group commander, the 1 or 2 star that's in charge of it, that's going to have to carry the water. But if commanding officers, and if you want to go back to, remember COVID on the carrier, and they look, I've got half the crew's got COVID, and we're pulling in, and they filleted him. And that'll rest in everyone's mind that even as a carrier skipper, it's plug and play. They'll grab another one and stick them in place. No one is indispensable, which is a problem. Because speaking truth to power, whether it's politics or within the ranks of the military, is liable to get you kicked right out and sidelined. Because the leadership only wants to hear what the leadership wants to hear.
Which is yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Scott, what are the odds that as this continues to escalate, that some of these other players see a vulnerability and make significant moves, such as Putin sees what's happening in the Middle East and says, time to finish off Ukraine. Xi says, hey, they're busy over there. Let's wander into Taiwan. And Kim Jong-il says, hey, let's cause some havoc around Japan and going into South Korea. What are the odds, Scott?
Well, you'd say 80% or greater. Ukraine's already over.
Yeah, it is.
Ukraine was over when the moment they started. And having Washington delude themselves, well, we'll just keep throwing billions at it to get us past the election, and then we'll let it kind of be old news. So we got a new war to fight, which is we're gonna fight in the Middle East now. So Israel's gonna be the belle of the ball and get any and everything she wanted. So any ammunition, weapon systems that aren't going to the black market through Ukraine are now getting clawed back to go to Israel. I think it'll speed up the Chinese timeline. Mm-hmm. And while the rest of the world's distracted, maybe a fifth column event in Taiwan in a quiet, no guns fired takeover. Very possible.
So, Scott, is there anyone in D.C. that you believe has not just the courage, but doesn't have the level of being controlled by any side to step in and say, all right, enough of this crap. All right, enough of it. Too many innocent people have died on every side of this equation, and it's going to come to an end. And is there anyone in Washington that you know of that has that capability?
They aren't senior enough yet, but Jake Ellzey, who I flew Tomcats with, congressman from Texas, and then I would say Chip Roy, possibly. But as you well know, 99% are bought and paid for.
Yeah.
And the longer they're there, the more corrupted they get. It's just too many opportunities.
Anyone in any other government that you're aware of that has that capability of doing that?
Truthfully, I'd say Putin, Xi, and the leader of Hungary could jump in and end this tomorrow.
Viktor Orban.
Yep.
And to all those people in our viewing audience, Scott, that say, what can I do? Pray, educate others, but what else can they do?
Inform others as much as you can and become a nuisance to your congressman. They're supposed to work for us, and it's one of the biggest things that has been forgotten by both state, local, and federal government is that it's government for the people, by the people, not government by the government, for the government. When they become their own entity existing outside of the will of the American people, we need to remind them who's really in charge. You can see, if I may make a quick example, when they tried to pull the last COVID strain out, oh, get your new booster, get it. 1.2% uptake. People are getting smarter, finally. Mm-hmm. And the more people that can wake up to really what's going on behind the curtain, the better. And the more noise we make, the better.
Yeah, they might not want to listen to my experiences, Scott, but they can be forced to hear. And they know there's only so far the system, the election infrastructure can allow them to win. But if so many people come out in droves against them, that manipulated infrastructure doesn't hold a candle to people who decide this person sold me out and they're not going to stay there. And they fear that. So many people say, they won't listen to me. Oh, they will. They won't if you're a single lone wolf talking. But if it's a herd of wolves, they might not like it, but they listen.
Absolutely.
In your career, Scott, have you ever seen a more dangerous situation in the world than it is right now?
No, by far. Yeah, the whole, hey, September 11th, let's go and implement democracy one country at a time, starting with Afghanistan, then we're going to do Iraq, then we're going to do Iran, and their whole neocon plan to make that happen. That's nothing compared to being on the brink like we are. This is, to me, even a more hairy situation than the Cuban Missile Crisis because of the leaps and bounds of technological advancement to the amount of destructive power just a single hypersonic missile would have. And it's going to be over in a couple button pushes in a matter of 15 minutes. That's the scary part. How do you off-ramp is probably a better way to say it. There are no off-ramps. They're on the highway to war in a hell of their own making, and nobody has the common sense to de-escalate and find an off-ramp.
And as you pointed out earlier, the off-ramp is you can't shoot your way out of this.
Nope, not at all. You're in a box canyon. There's no way out.
Yeah, and the only way to get out of that canyon, if you will, to rappel up the side of that canyon, the only option is to get the main principals in a room and say, all right, enough of this. We have to come to a solution so that this stops. Because if it doesn't stop, everybody's toast.
Correct.
And as you said, the primary players that can get that done: Orban from Hungary, Xi from China, Putin from Russia, Erdogan from Turkey.
Yep.
Bring somebody in to sit in the chair from Israel. Bring somebody to sit in the chair from Iran. Bring somebody to sit in the chair from, I don't know, at this point, the United States, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's anybody that can sit at the grown-ups table in that room from the United States at this point. But that's the only way out of this. That's the only way to rappel out of this essential canyon of death and destruction.
Completely agree.
So, Scott, educate out folks how they can. You have a number of different entities you're involved with. How can folks follow you and tell them about the various not operations, but the various businesses you're involved in?
Well, the standard social media channels. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram at Flake Fighter. My wife does most of the posting for me because I'm not as savvy as she is. Truth Social as well at Flake Fighter. We have a private aircraft management company, MCS Sky. We just opened a executive jet service here at Boerne Stage Airfield with 45,000 square foot of hangar space, and a Merit Air, which is our not to be named FBO, but it's the FBO without saying FBO. So that's a fixed base operator. It's our executive jet service, and we're opening Point Flight, which is going to be our Part 135 full charter operation.
And Scott, you know, in one of our previous interviews, you were put everybody like months ahead of the curve when you spoke about the part situation in the commercial airline industry. That there's a huge problem there. Well, it just so happens about a week and a half ago, right? All of a sudden, there's this breaking news that Scott Snow told us about, like, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 months ago, about the problems in the commercial airline industry. And that's not getting any better, is it?
No, it's not. And when we talked earlier about, you know, when energy turns off,
Yeah.
so what do you think happens if Straits of Hormuz shut off?
Yeah.
What if the Malaccan Straits shut off? What if any seaborne travel stops? You thought supply chain issues were a problem before, even more so now.
So all those people right outside that window in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, and in every community in our country, say, "Oh, come on, prepping, that kind of thing. Oh, come on, that's just so Neanderthal thinking, please." But in fact, Scott, and again, as a fighter pilot, situational awareness, where we are in this situation, prepping is actually another road to survival based on what these psychopaths are doing on a worldwide stage, isn't it?
No, absolutely. It's all about self-sufficiency and preservation of your family unit. So 6 months of food on hand is not a bad thing.
No.
And access to clean water. You know, you can live 3 days without water. You can live 3 weeks without food. And most of us, we see in survival situations, you know, in a survival situation, the fat guy gets skinny, the skinny guy dies. So most Americans have plenty of extra storage for at least 3 weeks. But become immune to the trials and tribulations that they're going to foist upon us. When the grocery stores shut down, when there's no food, there's no water, there's no rest. Grubhub's not going to be coming to your rescue and dropping off, you know, the latest cheeseburger. It's going to be survival mode, and you need to hone the skills to make that happen. Become self-reliant and self-sustaining for yourself and for your family. And that includes tighter community groups, because as these things go out of control, get to know your local farmers and, you know, your ranchers, people that you can barter with, because pretty soon the dollar bill is going to be insulation money or toilet paper. In fact, toilet paper is going to be worth more than the dollar.
Well, and in fact, what I've done is I've gone to other farmers, and also to a number of different store owners in our community and say, look, if the system goes down, the financial system goes down, are you willing to accept silver coins? And you know what? They all look at me and they go, well, we'll do that right now.
Absolutely.
Why do we have to wait for the system to go down, Dave?
Yeah.
Because I trust that. It's amazing. You said the awakening. These people all look at me and they go, I trust that coin more than I trust that piece of paper, Dave, right now, based on how this is going. Okay.
Yeah.
There has been an enormous awakening.
Absolutely. Well, and also when you look at silver, it has intrinsic value, but it also has industrial value too.
Yeah, that's right.
Because 60% of what comes out of the ground goes right into industry. You know, that phone, the computer I'm talking to you on right now, that all takes silver to make it happen.
Yeah, and how much silver is in the electronics in your plane?
Yep.
Scott, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank you, Scott, for your courage to speak about these issues, because the vast majority of folks that have your background are incredibly courageous, but they don't want to talk about things. They don't want to educate and empower the public. And I am deeply grateful, as are all of our listeners, for your willingness and courage to speak about the issues at hand, identifying the problems at hand, and speaking about not solutions on the world stage, but also for each individual person, how they can insulate themselves as best they can from the psychopaths dancing around on the world stage. I thank you, Scott, for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. And I thank you folks for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.